The Atlantic is quiet tonight. Far beyond the lights of the coast, the ocean stretches into darkness, its surface moving slowly beneath the moon, while thousands of ships and aircraft pass through the region every year without incident. Yet somewhere within this immense blue space is a name that has fascinated generations: the Bermuda Triangle. You may have heard the stories before: ships that vanished without sending a distress call, aircraft that disappeared after reporting that something seemed wrong with their navigation, rescue planes that went looking for the missing and never came home themselves, compasses that supposedly spun wildly, strange lights appearing over the horizon, and surrounding all of it, the suggestion that there may be something unusual hidden beneath the waves or beyond the clouds. But tonight, rather than rushing toward the most mysterious explanation, we are going to do something quieter and in many ways more fascinating. We are going to slow down and follow the evidence. We will travel through the history of the region, listen carefully to what the crews actually reported, examine the famous disappearances one by one, and then step back far enough to see how a collection of real tragedies became one of the most famous mysteries on Earth. Some of what we discover will be genuinely difficult to explain. Some of it will have surprisingly ordinary explanations. And some stories that have been repeated for decades turn out to be very different when the original records are examined. So let the sound of the ocean settle in. Let the night become quieter around you, and imagine an endless horizon with no landmarks, no road signs, and no familiar streets. Only water beneath you, sky above you, and the distant glow of the coast behind you. This is the Bermuda Triangle, not as a place of monsters and impossible physics, but as a real part of the Atlantic where weather, navigation, human judgment, distance, technology, and chance have occasionally combined in ways that left behind extraordinary stories. The first thing to understand is that the Bermuda Triangle is not an official geographic region with universally agreed boundaries. It is a popular name for a broad area of the western North Atlantic, usually described roughly by points near Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, or the Northern Caribbean, although different writers have drawn its borders differently. There is no international map showing a precise triangle in the ocean, and there is no scientific boundary separating its waters from the surrounding Atlantic. The name itself became popular only in the 20th century, decades after some of the most famous incidents associated with it had already occurred. That detail matters because it changes the way we should think about the mystery. The ocean did not suddenly become known as a dangerous triangle in ancient times. There was no ancient chart warning sailors to avoid a particular geometric shape. Instead, the legend grew gradually as newspapers, magazines, books, television programs, and later films gathered together stories of disappearances and presented them as evidence of a larger pattern. The region is also exceptionally busy. It sits beside major shipping routes connecting the United States, the Caribbean, Central America, and the Atlantic, while aircraft regularly cross it between North America, the Caribbean, and South America. When enormous numbers of ships and aircraft pass through any large region over many decades, accidents and disappearances are inevitable. That does not make the individual tragedies less mysterious, but it does mean that the question is not simply, did strange things happen here? They certainly did. The more useful question is, Did they happen here at a rate that requires a special explanation? Modern investigations have not established evidence that ships and aircraft disappear in this region at a rate that is unusually high compared with other heavily traveled parts of the ocean. Weather can become severe with little warning. The Gulf Stream can move floating debris rapidly away from the place where an accident occurred. Tropical storms and hurricanes can change the sea within hours. Strong currents, deep water, limited visibility, equipment failures, and human navigation errors can all turn a manageable situation into an emergency. And before the age of satellites, GPS, modern weather forecasting, emergency beacons, and constant digital communication, people crossing the ocean had far fewer ways to know exactly where they were or to summon help. The Bermuda Triangle, therefore, sits at an interesting intersection between a real and sometimes dangerous environment and a legend that became much larger than the evidence itself. Long before the phrase Bermuda Triangle became famous, sailors already understood that this part of the Atlantic could be demanding. The region is affected by powerful ocean currents, especially the Gulf Stream, which flows northward from the Caribbean and along the eastern coast of the United States before continuing toward the North Atlantic. A current this powerful can complicate search operations because debris does not necessarily remain close to the point where a vessel went down. Imagine dropping a piece of wood into a river and then returning hours later to search for it at the exact place where it entered the water. You may find nothing, not because the object disappeared mysteriously, but because the water carried it somewhere else. In the open ocean, the problem becomes much larger. Wind pushes objects across the surface, waves alter their direction, currents move them horizontally, and floating material can become scattered over enormous distances. Some wreckage sinks quickly, some remains afloat, some breaks apart, some is carried toward distant shores. A search conducted days after an accident may therefore be looking not at the place where the accident happened, but at a moving and constantly changing field of possibilities. Weather creates another layer of difficulty. The western North Atlantic and Caribbean can experience tropical storms and hurricanes, but severe weather does not always announce itself in the dramatic way that modern storm footage suggests. A vessel can encounter heavy seas, strong winds, rapidly changing visibility, or thunderstorms while still far from the center of a major storm. For aircraft, convective weather can create turbulence, lightning, icing at altitude, and navigation difficulties. Even today, pilots and sailors take changing weather seriously. In the middle of the 20th century, the margin for error was much smaller. Navigation was also different. Modern travelers can look at a moving map and see their position almost instantly. Earlier crews depended on compasses, radio navigation, celestial navigation, dead reckoning, visual landmarks, and estimates of speed and direction. Each method could be reliable when used correctly, but each contained opportunities for accumulated error. If an aircraft is slightly off course for a long period, the final position can be surprisingly far from the intended route. Over water, where the horizon looks almost identical in every direction, correcting that error can become difficult. This is one of the reasons the most famous Bermuda Triangle story, Flight 19, remains so compelling. It is not simply a story about 5 aircraft vanishing. It is a story about navigation, uncertainty, weather, fuel, radio communication, and the frightening realization that the people inside an aircraft may not know where they are. On the afternoon of December 5, 1945, 5 U.S. Navy TBM Avenger torpedo bombers departed from Naval Air Station, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on a routine training mission. The aircraft were not experimental machines disappearing into an unknown region. They were military aircraft being used for navigation and bombing training, and the mission was designed to give crews experience operating over water. The flight became known as Flight 19. The plan involved flying eastward from Florida, carrying out practice bombing near the Bahamas, turning north, and eventually returning toward the base. The weather at the beginning was not an apocalyptic scene. The training mission began normally. The aircraft reached the practice area and carried out the first part of the exercise. Then something changed. Radio communications indicated that the flight leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, was having difficulty determining the group's position. The surviving communications are fragmented and have been interpreted in different ways over the decades, but the official record makes clear that navigation problems were central to the incident. Taylor was an experienced naval aviator, but even experienced pilots can become disoriented when familiar visual references disappear and instruments or assumptions begin to conflict. The group was over water, with the Bahamas and Florida presenting different visual possibilities depending on their exact location, and the weather was changing. As the afternoon continued, the situation deteriorated. The pilots discussed their position and the direction they believed they needed to travel. At one point, radio transmissions indicated that they were uncertain of their location and were struggling to establish a reliable course. This is where the story becomes particularly haunting, because we can imagine what it meant to be inside those aircraft. The engines were running. The fuel gauges were falling. The horizon looked enormous and empty. The men knew they were somewhere above the Atlantic, but they were no longer confident about exactly where. Their radios could transmit, but radio communication could not automatically tell them their precise position. They needed to interpret what they were hearing while also trying to decide which direction would bring them home. As daylight faded, the situation became more serious. A navigation error that might be corrected during the first hour of a flight can become much harder to correct once fuel is running low and weather reduces visibility. The Navy eventually launched rescue aircraft to search for the missing Avengers. One of those aircraft, a PBM Mariner flying boat, also disappeared. 13 men were aboard that rescue aircraft. The loss of Flight 19 and the rescue aircraft produced one of the largest searches of its era. Ships and aircraft searched a vast area of ocean and surrounding land. Nothing conclusive was found. No confirmed wreckage of the 5 Avengers was recovered, and no confirmed remains of the 14 men aboard Flight 19 were found. The absence of physical evidence allowed the story to expand in the decades that followed. Yet the official naval history has pointed toward navigation problems, disorientation, fuel exhaustion, and worsening weather as plausible factors, while acknowledging that the precise sequence of events cannot be reconstructed with certainty. The rescue aircraft is a separate mystery. Naval historians have concluded that the PBM Mariner probably suffered an in-flight fire or explosion, with gasoline vapor accumulation in the bilges among the possibilities considered for the type. That tragedy, therefore, may not require the same explanation as the disappearance of Flight 19. Two different accidents became connected in popular memory because they happened on the same evening during the same search operation. And once that connection entered books and newspapers, the story became far larger than the original reports. The loss of the USS Cyclops is another story that gives the Bermuda Triangle its weight, because the ship was enormous by the standards of its time and carried hundreds of people. The Cyclops was a US Navy collier, a vessel designed to transport fuel and other heavy materials. On March 4, 1918, after stopping at Barbados, the ship continued toward Baltimore carrying manganese ore. There were 306 people aboard according to the commonly cited historical record, including crew and passengers. The Cyclops never reached its destination. There was no confirmed distress call, no confirmed wreckage, and no known survivor. The ship simply disappeared into the Atlantic. At the time, the world was in the middle of the First World War, so investigators initially had to consider the possibility of enemy action. But later examination of German records found no evidence that a German submarine or surface raider had sunk the vessel. The loss, therefore, remained unexplained. The Cyclops was also carrying an unusually heavy cargo, and later naval historians have considered catastrophic structural failure a likely possibility. The ship belonged to a class whose design and cargo handling characteristics deserve attention. A vessel carrying thousands of tons of dense ore behaves differently from one carrying a lighter cargo, and severe weather can place enormous stresses on a hull. There were also questions surrounding the condition and loading of the ship. None of this produces a dramatic final answer, but it does show how a mystery can contain several ordinary dangers at once. A large vessel at sea can encounter structural problems, heavy seas, shifting cargo, mechanical failure, or flooding. And if the ship sinks quickly in deep water, there may be little evidence left on the surface. The ocean does not preserve every accident in a way that makes later investigation easy. The Cyclops also acquired an important place in the later mythology, because its disappearance occurred decades before the Bermuda Triangle became a popular phrase. Later writers could look backward and gather the Cyclops together with Flight 19 and other incidents, making them appear to be chapters of a single phenomenon, even though the original events occurred in different historical circumstances. Two of the Cyclops' sister ships, Proteus and Nereus, also later disappeared without trace while carrying ore, and these losses were likewise incorporated into Bermuda Triangle stories. Their disappearances show why historians have to be cautious when dealing with patterns. A collection of similar tragedies can look supernatural if we ignore the common physical characteristics of the ships, their cargoes, the weather, and the conditions under which they were operating. The mystery remains emotionally powerful, but the evidence points us back toward the difficult realities of early 20th century ocean travel. One of the most persistent ideas associated with the Bermuda Triangle is that compasses behave strangely there, perhaps because the region contains unusual magnetic forces. The reality is subtler. A magnetic compass does not point directly toward the geographic North Pole. It responds to Earth's magnetic field, and the difference between magnetic north and true north changes depending on location and time. This difference is called magnetic declination. Navigators have always had to account for it. In some places, the magnetic and geographic directions can align more closely. In others, they differ significantly. The existence of magnetic variation is not unique to the Bermuda Triangle, and it does not mean that a compass suddenly stops working. A pilot or navigator who understands the local variation can use a compass effectively. The more important issue is that navigation errors can accumulate when a crew is uncertain about its position, particularly over an ocean without visible landmarks. A compass can be functioning normally while the person interpreting it is working from an incorrect assumption about where the aircraft or vessel is located. That distinction is crucial. When an instrument seems to contradict what a person expects, the natural temptation is to blame the instrument. But navigation is a system involving instruments, maps, calculations, weather information, and human interpretation. A mistake in one part can influence every decision that follows. The same is true today, even with advanced technology. A GPS receiver can provide an accurate position, but if someone enters the wrong destination or misunderstands the display, the technology does not prevent the mistake. The old stories of Bermuda Triangle compasses spinning wildly are therefore much more dramatic than the broader evidence supports. There is no established magnetic anomaly unique to the region capable of explaining the famous disappearances. What does exist is a complicated environment where navigation has historically been challenging, particularly when weather, equipment limitations, and human uncertainty are combined. And perhaps that is more interesting than a supernatural explanation, because it reveals how thin the boundary can be between confidence and confusion when a person is surrounded by an environment that offers almost no visual reference points. On land, if you become uncertain about your direction, you can often stop and look for a road, building, mountain, river, or sign. At sea, you may look in every direction and see essentially the same horizon. If the sky is cloudy and the ocean is rough, even the sun and stars can disappear as navigation references. The world becomes a moving surface beneath an indistinguishable sky. That psychological pressure matters. A calm decision can become difficult when fuel is falling, weather is changing, and everyone in the cockpit knows that time is running out. There are other famous stories connected with the Triangle, some of which are much harder to verify than Flight 19 and the Cyclops. Over the years, books and television programs have repeated accounts of vessels supposedly found drifting with their crews missing, aircraft disappearing after strange radio messages, and objects appearing in unusual locations. Some stories have grown with every retelling. Details are added, dates shift, and dramatic claims become separated from the original records. This is a common feature of mystery storytelling. A story that begins with uncertainty can become more certain as it is repeated, even though the underlying evidence has not changed. Consider how memory works in ordinary life. If 10 people tell the same story and each person adds a small detail, the 10th version can sound far more complete than the first. Historical mysteries can evolve in the same way, except that the storytellers may be separated by decades. The Bermuda Triangle became especially vulnerable to this process because it offered a ready-made framework. Once writers began grouping unrelated incidents together, each new disappearance could be presented as additional evidence. The reader no longer saw separate events. They saw a pattern. The power of the pattern could then make the next story seem mysterious before anyone examined its specific circumstances. This does not mean every unexplained disappearance has an ordinary explanation waiting to be discovered. The ocean contains genuine unknowns. Wrecks remain unfound. Evidence can be destroyed or scattered. Investigations can be incomplete. Some incidents may never be reconstructed with confidence. But uncertainty is not the same thing as evidence for a supernatural cause. It is perfectly reasonable to say, we do not know exactly what happened. In fact, that may be the most scientifically honest conclusion available. The mystery becomes weaker only when uncertainty is turned into certainty without evidence. If a ship disappears and we do not know why, we should not automatically conclude that it was taken by a strange force. But we should also not pretend that we know the exact mechanical failure, weather event, or human error if the records cannot establish it. The most satisfying documentary stories are often the ones that allow uncertainty to remain. They let the unanswered question breathe, instead of filling every quiet space with speculation. The physical environment of the Western Atlantic provides many more possibilities for ordinary danger than the popular legend sometimes admits. Tropical cyclones can generate enormous waves, violent winds, heavy rain, and rapidly changing conditions. Even outside hurricanes, thunderstorms can develop quickly. The ocean itself is not a flat blue surface. Waves interact with one another, currents move beneath them, and weather systems can change the sea state over relatively short periods. The Gulf Stream adds another powerful factor. It can move at several knots and can carry floating debris away from a sinking vessel. Searchers looking for survivors or wreckage must therefore estimate how wind and current may have moved the evidence since the incident. This is why a failed search does not automatically imply that nothing physical ever existed. It may mean that the search area was enormous, the object sank, the debris dispersed, or the available information was insufficient to locate it. Search technology has improved enormously over the past century, but even modern investigators sometimes struggle to find aircraft and ships in deep water. The ocean is vast and three-dimensional. A wreck resting thousands of meters below the surface can be difficult to detect even when its approximate location is known. In earlier decades, the challenge was much greater. There were no satellite images of storm systems in the modern sense, no global positioning system, no widespread emergency locator transmitters, and no modern network of automated ocean observations. A ship or aircraft could become separated from its expected route and leave searchers with a very large area to investigate. This is particularly important when we consider how quickly a rescue operation can turn into a recovery operation. A person who falls into cold water, rough water, or a storm may have only a limited survival window. A lifeboat can drift. A raft can become invisible between waves. A radio transmission may provide only an approximate position. Every hour matters. The absence of survivors after a disappearance is therefore not evidence that something impossible occurred. Sometimes the ocean simply wins the race against the search. That may sound less dramatic than aliens or portals, but there is something profoundly unsettling about it. The sea does not need supernatural powers to make a person vanish. It only needs distance, depth, weather, and time. The question of why the Bermuda Triangle became famous leads us away from the ocean and toward publishing history. In the middle of the 20th century, writers began collecting reports of unexplained maritime and aviation incidents and describing them as part of a mysterious region. The phrase Bermuda Triangle became especially influential after articles and books popularized it. The concept offered a simple image that could be understood immediately. 3 points on a map enclosing a dangerous space. It was a compelling narrative device. A triangle suggests boundaries, and boundaries suggest something hidden inside. Once the name became familiar, older incidents could be reinterpreted through it. A disappearance that had once been regarded as an isolated accident could now be introduced as another Bermuda Triangle mystery. This changed the context in which people encountered the story. The legend was not created by a single event. It was built through accumulation. Flight 19 became central. The Cyclops became central. Other ship and aircraft disappearances were added. Then came theories about magnetic anomalies, methane bubbles, extraterrestrial visitors, Atlantis, time distortions, and other possibilities. Some of these ideas were entertaining. Some were presented seriously by enthusiasts, but they were not established explanations. In fact, the official position of organizations, such as the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, has been that there is no evidence that mysterious disappearances occur more frequently in the Bermuda Triangle than in other large and heavily traveled regions of the ocean. The US Navy's historical material similarly treats the triangle as a popular myth rather than an official geographic danger zone. This does not erase the historical incidents. It simply separates the incidents from the legend built around them. That distinction is useful for our documentary because we do not need to choose between everything is supernatural and nothing interesting happened. Something very interesting did happen. Human beings encountered an environment that was difficult to navigate, and in several cases, they disappeared without leaving enough evidence to reconstruct the final moments. Those events became stories, the stories became patterns, and the patterns became a legend. The legend then became so famous that it began to influence how people interpreted new events. In that sense, the Bermuda Triangle is not only a mystery of the ocean, it is also a mystery of human storytelling and perception. There is another reason the triangle continues to fascinate us, and it has less to do with geography than with the fear of uncertainty. Humans are remarkably uncomfortable with incomplete stories. If a person disappears, we want to know where they went. If a ship is found empty, we want to know what happened to the crew. If an aircraft sends a confusing final message, we want to understand what the pilots were seeing. When evidence disappears along with the people who created it, our minds naturally begin constructing possibilities. This is not a weakness. It is part of how human reasoning works. We search for patterns because patterns help us predict the world. But the same ability can cause us to see connections that are not actually there. A handful of unusual disappearances can feel like proof of a hidden force when they are placed together on a map, especially if the map has a dramatic shape. The triangle itself becomes part of the story. We begin imagining that crossing an invisible boundary changes the rules. Yet the ocean does not know where the lines on our maps are. A ship does not enter a supernatural zone because it crosses a particular longitude. Weather systems continue moving according to physics. Currents continue flowing. Human decisions continue to matter. Aircraft engines continue burning fuel. Hulls continue responding to waves and structural stress. The physical world remains indifferent to the stories we tell about it. That indifference is strangely comforting. It means the ocean is not waiting for us. It is simply there, vast and powerful, following rules that existed long before anyone named a triangle. And perhaps this is why the most relaxing way to explore the mystery is to let go of the need for a spectacular answer. We can accept that some cases are solved, some are partly understood, and some remain unresolved. We can admire the evidence without forcing it into a conclusion. We can listen to the last known transmissions of Flight 19 and feel the weight of those moments without turning uncertainty into mythology. We can remember the 306 people aboard the Cyclops without pretending that we know exactly how the ship disappeared. We can acknowledge the rescue crew who went looking for Flight 19 and never returned. These were real people, not characters created for a mystery story. Their lives were larger than the final moments that history remembers. The legend should never become more important than the people. And then there is the possibility that the most mysterious thing about the Bermuda Triangle is simply how little of the deep ocean we can see. Even today, large portions of the seafloor remain difficult to explore directly. The ocean is dark at depth, cold in many regions, and under enormous pressure. A wreck can rest quietly for decades without anyone seeing it. Sediment can cover structures. Currents can scatter lighter materials. Marine life can slowly alter exposed surfaces. A vessel that vanished a century ago may now be part of the seafloor ecosystem, surrounded by organisms that have no connection to the human drama that once unfolded above. If a wreck is eventually found, it can transform an old mystery. A sonar image can reveal a hull. A remotely operated vehicle can inspect damage. Investigators can examine the position of the wreck, the condition of the structure, and the surrounding geology. Sometimes the evidence provides an explanation. Sometimes it creates new questions. But even when the wreck remains hidden, the lack of discovery does not mean the ocean is hiding something supernatural. It means the environment is extraordinarily good at preserving distance between the event and the investigator. This is why modern technology has changed the Bermuda Triangle story without eliminating it. Satellites can track weather. Aircraft can broadcast positions. Ships can transmit their locations. Emergency beacons can guide rescuers. Sonar can map the seafloor, yet accidents still occur. The difference is that many modern accidents leave much better records. A vessel may have a digital track, weather data, radar information, satellite communication, and automatic identification records. Investigators can reconstruct the final hours with far greater precision. The old disappearances are harder because the technological trail is incomplete. In that sense, the Bermuda Triangle belongs partly to an earlier age of travel, when the world was connected enough for people to cross oceans routinely, but not yet connected enough for every movement to be recorded. That gap created a special kind of mystery. People could disappear beyond the horizon, and the rest of the world might never know exactly what happened. If we return once more to Flight 19, the story becomes less about a cursed ocean and more about the fragile chain of decisions that can shape a disaster. 5 aircraft left a Florida base on a training mission. The first part went normally, then navigation became uncertain. The pilots tried to determine their position. Communications became increasingly concerned. Weather and fading daylight reduced their options. Fuel became a critical constraint. The search began, and then another aircraft was lost. At the end of the operation, 14 men from Flight 19 and 13 men from the rescue mariner were gone. The ocean had swallowed the evidence. Decades later, the story would be retold with increasingly dramatic details, but beneath all of those versions is a quieter and more painful reality. People became lost. The difference between being safely over land and being lost over the ocean can be enormous. On land, even a serious navigation error may eventually lead to a road, settlement, river, or mountain. Over water, there may be nothing. If an aircraft runs out of fuel, the crew cannot simply wait for morning. If a ship loses power during a storm, there may be no nearby harbor. If a radio transmission fails, the outside world may not know the exact location. These are not supernatural weaknesses. They are the limitations imposed by geography. The Bermuda Triangle legend can therefore be understood as a story born from a period when those limitations were especially visible. It reminds us that modern navigation is not a trivial convenience. Knowing where you are is one of the most important pieces of information a traveler can possess. The development of radio navigation, radar, satellite navigation, weather forecasting, and emergency communications has dramatically reduced some of the risks faced by earlier generations. Yet the underlying environment remains. The Atlantic is still enormous. Storms still form. Currents still move. Engines can still fail. People can still become disoriented. And the horizon can still look exactly the same in every direction. The USS Cyclops tells a different version of the same lesson. A huge ship carrying hundreds of people can appear almost indestructible when viewed from a distance. But size does not eliminate vulnerability. A ship is a complex structure interacting with water, weather, cargo, machinery, and human decisions. Heavy cargo can change how a vessel responds to waves. Structural weaknesses can become critical under stress. A storm can create forces that are difficult to appreciate from shore. And if a vessel sinks quickly in deep water, even a large ship can become almost impossible to locate without accurate coordinates. The Cyclops vanished during a period of global conflict, but later investigation found no evidence that enemy action was responsible. The ship's cargo and structural characteristics have therefore remained important when historians consider possible causes. The absence of a final answer has allowed the legend to survive, but it is worth remembering that many maritime disasters remain uncertain even when they occur outside the triangle. Historical records are often incomplete. A ship can disappear before sending a distress signal. A radio operator may be unable to transmit. Weather can erase physical traces. Survivors may have no means of communicating. Search teams may begin too late. These conditions existed around the world long before the Bermuda Triangle became famous. The triangle simply became the name attached to a collection of them. And perhaps that is why the story feels so universal. The fear of disappearing without explanation is not unique to one patch of ocean. It is a human fear. We want the world to keep records of us. We want our final moments to make sense. We want someone to know where we were. When the sea removes those records, it creates a silence that imagination quickly fills. As the night deepens, the triangle itself begins to look different. From a satellite, there is no glowing boundary. From an aircraft, there is no line across the ocean. From a ship, there is no invisible wall. There is only the Atlantic, moving endlessly beneath the sky. The region contains beautiful islands, busy ports, deep water, coral reefs, powerful currents, shipping lanes, fishing grounds, aircraft routes, and changing weather. It is not an empty void. Millions of ordinary journeys have crossed these waters safely. That fact is easy to forget because ordinary journeys do not become legends. A passenger aircraft takes off from Florida, crosses the Caribbean, lands safely, and nobody writes a book about it. A cargo ship passes through the region, reaches its destination, unloads its containers, and disappears into another normal day. The human mind is drawn toward exceptions, not routine. The Bermuda Triangle, therefore, became famous because unusual stories are memorable. The thousands upon thousands of uneventful journeys become invisible in comparison. This is one of the most important lessons of the entire mystery. If we want to understand risk, we have to look at the denominator, not just the dramatic cases. We need to know how many ships and aircraft travel through a region, what the normal accident rate is, and whether the supposed anomaly is actually larger than what we would expect by chance. Without that context, almost any busy transportation region could be made to look mysterious. The Bermuda Triangle has been examined repeatedly, and the evidence does not demonstrate a special supernatural danger. That conclusion does not make the stories boring. It makes them more human. Flight 19 becomes a story about navigation and uncertainty. Cyclops becomes a story about a massive vessel lost in wartime conditions and deep ocean. Other incidents become stories about storms, equipment, human judgment, or incomplete evidence. The mystery becomes a collection of real questions rather than one enormous supernatural answer. There is something peaceful about that conclusion when we allow ourselves to sit with it. The ocean does not have to contain a portal to another dimension to be mysterious. It does not need an alien craft beneath the waves. It does not need a lost civilization waiting beneath the surface. The real ocean is already strange enough. It contains trenches deeper than mountains are tall, currents that move across entire basins, ecosystems that survive without sunlight, mountains and valleys hidden beneath kilometers of water, and wrecks that can remain unseen for generations. The Bermuda Triangle story sits on the surface of this much larger mystery. Beneath the popular legends is a world of physical processes that are still worth studying. Weather moves across the Atlantic. Currents carry heat from the tropics toward higher latitudes. Clouds build and dissolve. Waves rise and fall. The planet rotates beneath everything. Magnetic fields change gradually. Human technology interacts with all of these forces. When something goes wrong, the outcome can be devastating without being supernatural. Perhaps this is the most useful way to think about the triangle tonight. We do not have to decide whether it is completely ordinary or impossibly strange. We can separate the documented from the speculative and leave the genuinely unresolved cases unresolved. We can remember that a mystery is not destroyed when we find a likely explanation. Sometimes the explanation makes the story more remarkable because it reveals how many ordinary forces can combine to produce an extraordinary event. A compass error, a wrong assumption, a changing wind, a moving current, a few hours of lost daylight, and limited fuel may sound like small things when considered separately. Together, they can determine whether a crew returns home. The same is true of a ship. Cargo, whether hull design, machinery, visibility, and distance, can interact in ways that no one person can fully control. The ocean is a system of systems. Small changes can become large consequences. So tonight, if you imagine the Bermuda Triangle, imagine it without the glowing lines drawn across a map. Imagine a calm Atlantic horizon instead. Picture a small aircraft moving through pale evening light, its engine humming steadily, while far below it, the ocean stretches without roads or landmarks. Think of the pilots trying to understand their position with the tools available to them. Think of the men aboard the Cyclops moving through their routines, never knowing that history would remember the ship because it failed to arrive. Think of the rescue crews who left their bases because someone else was missing. These were ordinary human beings inside extraordinary circumstances. Their stories deserve curiosity, but they also deserve respect. The mystery should never become more important than the lives behind it. And as we let those stories settle, perhaps the Bermuda Triangle becomes something different from what we expected. It becomes a lesson in how humans navigate uncertainty. It becomes a reminder that the world is larger than our maps, that technology changes what we can know, and that the absence of evidence should not be filled automatically with imagination. Some disappearances may eventually be explained. Some may remain unknown forever. The ocean is patient. It does not hurry to give back its secrets. A wreck can rest quietly beneath the water while storms pass overhead and generations come and go on the shore. The people who once worried about a missing ship may become names in archives. The coordinates may become uncertain. The stories may change, but the physical world remains. The waves continue their movement. The Gulf Stream continues carrying warm water northward. The clouds gather and drift away. The stars appear above the Atlantic, just as they appeared before anyone had ever heard the phrase Bermuda Triangle. And perhaps that is where we should leave the mystery. Not with a monster, not with an alien spacecraft, not with a portal hidden beneath the sea, but with the quiet recognition that the unknown does not need to be supernatural to be profound. The Bermuda Triangle is a story built from real disappearances, incomplete records, dangerous weather, difficult navigation, powerful currents, deep water, human decisions, and decades of storytelling. The most famous cases remain fascinating precisely because the final moments are not fully known. Flight 19 disappeared after a chain of navigation difficulties and worsening conditions, and no confirmed wreckage of the 5 Avengers has ever been recovered. The rescue mariner vanished as well, probably because of an in-flight fire or explosion. The USS Cyclops disappeared with 306 people aboard, leaving no confirmed wreckage, while later historical analysis has considered structural failure and the challenges of its heavy cargo. These facts are enough. They do not need to be decorated with impossible explanations. The true mystery is already large. Imagine how immense the ocean must have seemed to the people who crossed it before satellites, before GPS, before modern weather radar, before instant communication. They traveled through a world where the horizon could hide almost anything, and where the distance between a safe arrival and a disaster could be measured in minutes. We live in a more connected age, but the ocean still teaches the same lesson. Some environments do not become small simply because our technology improves. They remain powerful, indifferent, and beautiful. So as you settle into sleep, imagine that endless Atlantic once more. The surface is dark now, but not frightening. Moonlight moves across the waves. Far away, a ship's lights pass quietly along the horizon. Somewhere overhead, an aircraft follows a precise modern route guided by systems that earlier generations could scarcely have imagined. And below, deep beneath the water, the ocean continues its slow movement, holding whatever traces of the past still remain. There is no need to solve everything tonight. Some questions can remain open. Some stories can remain mysterious. The Bermuda Triangle can simply become what it has always been beneath the legend. A vast piece of our planet where real people once faced real uncertainty, where some journeys ended without clear answers, and where the darkness of the ocean left just enough silence for human imagination to begin telling stories. The waves continue. The night grows quieter. The horizon remains still. And somewhere beyond it, the Atlantic carries on, ancient and enormous, keeping its secrets beneath the stars.